morning.
Hi.
And welcome to the Common Geeking Program, a book club podcast where each week 3 of us read up on a topic, or play up on a topic, and then discuss it from our geeky, nerdy perspectives. This week, I am your host, Laura Kramer, and we'll be discussing legacy board games, and we are talking about Pandemic Legacy Season 1. I'm joined by 2 people, each of whom has selected a domain that they think connects to our topic and theme this week, and they are...
Today I will be talking about the Avon Hill game, Betrayal at House on the Hill.
Cool beans.
And my name is Jeff Leavitt, and this week I'm going to be talking about another legacy board game called Time Stories, and time is supposed to be an acronym for something, because it's T.I.M. It's one of those.
Didn't they specify in the intro where they're like, welcome to the Time Pod, and they told you what it stood for?
Yeah, I'm sure they did. I don't remember what it stands for.
I don't
and I didn't care enough to look it up.
That is fair. All right.
It's not the most crucial part about the game.
Yeah, true. Great. Thank you guys for introducing yourselves. We are
welcome.
going to start by summarizing our topic and domains before we openly discuss. And then finally, we'll close with a competitive ratings section to determine who best contributed and whether today's topic is enjoyable.
I realized a little while ago that, so not to get too much into it because we will in the summary, but like at a point in a game, you get to pick like relationships with each other, right? And Keenan and I, without thinking about it, chose rivals as the relationship, and now it's so perfect because we were all, working together yesterday, today is a different fucking day. You're going down, motherfucker.
Listen here, Leavitt.
And Laura, you gotta go with your family instead of your coworker.
I know, it is a strong bond. I know, it's gonna be hard to fight.
Wow, feel really stacked against me.
So... This is a little off topic here, but this is the earliest that I've ever recorded. I usually record after work on like a random Wednesday, and we start at like 7:30 p.m.
Yeah.
And it is a Sunday morning here, and I just made myself an extra cup of coffee to, get myself boosted up for this morning. And
looks steamy.
So you're sleepy in the other direction this time.
It looks disgusting. I poured like soy milk creamer into it, and it's like clotting, and it's really gross.
Oh,
ooh, gross.
You don't want to hear the word clotting when you're talking about anything that you're drinking.
No, it's not good. It vaguely reminds me of the time when I made White Russians in college where we had, I'm pretty sure, spoiled milk and then mixed it with alcohol. So it reminded me a little bit of that. So I'm going to go get a spoon and see if I can just mix this away and pretend like everything's fine. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you come back, we'll be in the summary.
I'm not trying to judge anyone, but if she had hot chocolate, this wouldn't happen. I'm just saying, some people give me looks.
Hot chocolate superior to coffee. I agree.
Yeah, people give me looks whenever I order it at, restaurants, but like I'm sitting down and I'm gonna enjoy my breakfast. I'm gonna enjoy my lunch.
You can look like you're bougie like everyone else and you're drinking coffee, but you're actually drinking hot chocolate and your experience is much better.
I said it's kind of stressful whenever the waitress tries to give you more coffee. They're like, "I'll fill you up." I'm like, "Oh no."
You're like, whoa, that is not what's in there.
All right. An update. It looks much more normal now, so I'm going to pretend like everything's fine.
That's like half my life is just pretending like everything's fine.
If I die from some horrible gastrointestinal disease tomorrow, you'll know why.
Yeah. All right, cool.
We can attribute it to this podcast.
It would be its fault, it's true. Well, that was great. Let's get started. So to summarize this topic, I think what we're going to do is I'll describe a little bit about the game, and then we 3, which we'll go into a little more detail, played a little bit of it last night, and then we'll kind of talk about our experiences playing through Pandemic Legacy.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it.
And then we'll just chat about it. So I will give a little bit of a summary, I suppose. So we're talking about legacy-type board games. There are a few of them that are pretty popular out on the market right now, and I have a feeling they're going to become more popular. But basically, the idea is that a legacy board game is really only playable one time because the actions and decisions you make in your gameplay affect future gameplays.
Yeah.
That might mean in Pandemic Legacy, essentially, you'll go through, your decisions will affect the okay, so Pandemic, if you've never played, is a board game where you have the world, you're trying to fight off diseases, and it's specifically like our universe, our world. So like you have Tokyo.
It's also it's collaborative as opposed to a lot of board games where you're against each other. It's you versus the game in Pandemic, or everyone together versus the game rather.
And so like if one of your cities falls, you have to like put a marker on the board that stays on the board, and then that city is still fallen when you play another a session later.
Which is also, that's in Legacy, not in the regular game.
Correct. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, shit.
There are also cards in Legacy that you have to destroy at certain times or scratch things off of to get like win bonuses and stuff like that. So essentially, as you're playing through the game, like you can't really play it again because you'd have to purchase a whole new set because the idea is that you destroy as you go.
Right. Do we want to take a little bit more in depth just because I think talking about how like the basics of how Pandemic works will lay us down a good like framework to talk about how Legacy is different.
Absolutely. Jeff, do you want to give a description? I think you've played more regular Pandemic than I have.
Yeah, so Pandemic is a clusterfuck of a game where, like I said earlier, you're all working together. The mechanic of the game is basically like every turn you infect more cities with one of 4 diseases, and then once a certain city gets like a number of infection cubes, then it like outbreaks. Which is one of the ways that you can lose the game is by getting a bunch of outbreaks. Another way is running out of time, and the third way is running out of the actual pieces to put on the board, but that's not super important. But so basically, like everyone has their own roles. Like there's like the medic or the dispatcher or the researcher, the scientist, who all do different things that help you try to cure these diseases. And the basic premise, like the goal of the game, is to cure the diseases, which means that you just have to like find a certain number of cards that are the appropriate color and then discard them. And meanwhile, you sort of have to clean up problems to make sure like outbreaks don't explode, because like, you know, if you get the map set up in a certain way where you're just trying to win and you're not worrying about like solving problems, then it's easy for things to build up, and then you could like lose the entire game in one turn through like chain reactions or stuff like that. Because when something outbreaks, it moves up to other cities, and then those cities may have already had cubes in them to begin with, so then they might outbreak, and it's a huge mess. So yeah, that's kind of the basic thing. Is you're working not when I said time, it's based on like running out of cards in the deck.
Left.
Yeah, so it's not you don't physically time yourself, but it is a timed system. Yeah, and then we can get into what some of the roles do a little bit later once we talk about how Legacy expands on it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or at least the ones we played.
And I did mean to mention this earlier, and I will mention it now. This might give some spoilers of the Season 1 Pandemic Legacy game.
Yeah.
I have not played all the way through Season 1 yet, and we only played through February yesterday, so it shouldn't be too spoilery, but if you're really interested in how the first couple of months work, or you don't really want spoilers, maybe don't listen to this episode. Yeah, in my opinion, at least what I got from it, I don't think that that's hugely detrimental to your ability to enjoy play the game, because it doesn't like reveal mysteries that like, you know, that would change your whole perspective on it going the second time. But like the big Legacy part of it is the actual destruction of the cards and putting stickers in certain places. So like I think that, you know, like also the way that we played it on Tabletop Simulator, the Steam game. Mm-hmm. So like the way that we did it, I think even if we got all the way to December or however far it goes, I think that it would be totally replayable, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, cool. All right, so how are we doing on time?
We got 5 minutes, so we're
plenty.
Good. Yeah.
Great. I mean, is there anything else? So we talked a little bit about what Legacy board games are. We talked a little bit about what regular Pandemic is, and we kind of sprinkled in. But essentially, Pandemic Legacy has several seasons, and you buy each season as its own box set game. So you go to the board game store. Yeah, you go to the board game store and you look at all the board games, and each box says Pandemic Legacy Season 1, Season 2, Season 3. I don't know how many
are the seasons based on months, or does like Season 1 come with a number of months?
A year.
So season 1 is a whole year. It goes
Is
January
the whole year?
to December.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Gotcha.
So I assume, although I don't know because I haven't played season 2, that it's the same in the further seasons.
But then it like starts off as not like January again, but like the hypothetical 13th month.
Yeah, so I would imagine it would be like January 2016 and season 2 is January 2017 or something like that.
Because like the thing that we found out while playing it yesterday is that January is more or less, aside from
Pandemic.
like some things at the end, is just the base game of Pandemic, and then things start to really change like end of January, like February.
Yeah.
And then it gets more and more
ramped
different
up in March. Yeah. So we decided not to play through March. We had this great plan where we were like, this is going to take us like 3 hours. We're going to do the whole thing, play, and then record. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
We played for 5.5 hours yesterday, partly because we had some tabletop simulator issues. But we did decide to read through the beginning of March upgrade, so we like opened the boxes and saw what changes were happening, and I think that was important because it changed quite significantly from February to March.
Right. Also, basically, like we got through January and we're like, okay, so we don't really have a good sense of how this game is different because January is more or less the base game of Pandemic. But I'd say, like, in a broad stroke, I would say the big way that it changes it is it makes like, so Pandemic is a famously pretty like difficult game to win. And you can adjust different difficulty levels, like by the number of epidemics, which is a mechanic that you have in the game, which makes shit hit the fan, basically. But how Legacy changes that is it makes like the short-term stuff, I think, a little bit easier. Like one of the first things that it does in January is it basically makes one of the 4 things that you have to cure irrelevant to a degree. It makes it a little bit more difficult to deal with, but you then only have to cure 3 of them. Right. So it makes things a little bit easier in the short term, but then if you go at it from a mentality of, oh, we only have to worry about 3 diseases, so let's just like try to power through and not worry about outbreaks, then it will really end up fucking you up later because the outbreaks that you get like damage the cities, which then stays through with you to the next month. Right. So like, if you just try to power through, which is totally possible to beat each month by just powering through and not worrying about outbreaks to a degree.
Well, I would say that's possible in the early stages. I don't know if it's possible later.
No, I'm saying in the early stages.
February,
but like, each mentality, right? Like, each month you have that mentality. But if you do that, it'll end up, like, making it, like, just virtually impossible later, is the sense that I got from it, even though we never, got to the later.
That feels true to my playthrough in the actual board game.
And then there's other things that, like, you get, like, power-ups as you go along. So, like, certain abilities that you have as certain characters you don't start off with, and then you have the ability to add on, like, the powers later. Like, in February, I added on Pilot, which made, like, moving from city to city easier, essentially, because you didn't have to discard cards to do it, just as an example.
Yeah, and that's cool because you, as a group, you only get a certain number of upgrades per end of month. So, like, if you get to the end of January, you can take your win or lose bonus, but you have to decide collectively only 2, and you have a ton of options. So, like, you really have to work collectively to figure out what makes sense, and the upgrades can go on any character, so it's not like...
Yeah, so you don't have to be playing with certain people. Yeah. And then, like, you get better bonuses if you win the previous month, right?
Yeah, you get a win bonus, which makes the beginning a little bit easier.
We actually won both January and February. What do we redo January if we lose, or do we still go into February? We didn't really explore that side of it. The way
that the game works is that if you lose the beginning of January, you play the second half of January, so you basically do an early and late month. Okay. If you lose both of them, you just move on to February with no win bonus.
Gotcha.
So you will continue forward, it just doesn't make it easier. One thing that I really like about, or I thought was kind of funny, was that it gives you funded events. So at the beginning, you start with 4 funded events, which are basically 4 free cards that make it easier to play. If you win, the text says, like, oh, you guys are doing such a great job. It seems like you don't need this much money, so you actually lose the funded events as it gets... Like, so
that
if you're winning,
depressingly realistic.
And then if you lose, then you get to add more funded events back in because they're like, oh, clearly you need more funding to make sure.
No, it's funny because like it's totally appropriate to the nature of Pandemic, where even when you do things well, it somehow ends up fucking you over a little bit, because it's just like you get your bonuses, but also you get these bonuses doing away because you're doing too well.
Yeah.
Because the game is like has such a passive attitude of trying to just like fuck everyone over. It's really like true to form, I think.
Yeah, so yeah, that's a little bit about Pandemic Legacy Season 1. One thing that I would love to explore at some point is how it goes from Season 1 to Season 2. Because I don't actually know that, but that'd be really cool thing to find out.
That would be a fun thing to do in the future. I guess so. Just to talk about Legacy, just for a second, I think that like the way that these games something that's always been confusing to me when I started to play these games, and perhaps ended up fucking me over, is that I think that the intended way that this game is supposed to be played, since it is only one-time use, is not all at once.
Yeah,
it's like a big thing. Like you're supposed to like. Like Pandemic Legacy is set up into these months, right? Like you're supposed to do like January and then like meet up a week later and do February or something like that,
Yeah.
Like, and that's the same for Time Stories, and I'll get into that later. But like, so it's a little bit different from regular board games, because like on paper it sounds like, a board game, but you can only play it once. Sounds like this huge fucking ripoff, but it's not quite that bad,
right?
Because you do play it more than once, but you can only like it does have a limited replay value.
Yeah. And then just one last point before we move on. So I just did a little quick Google search of what these games are running for. So Pandemic Season 1, or Pandemic Legacy Season 1 is still, you buy it for, it's like a $60 game. So it's a $60 board game. So the same
as like the regular game is about that much as well.
So I'm sure we will get into cost and replay value at some point. So I just want to throw that out.
Oh, we will. I have opinions about that.
I am sure. All right.
But wait, how much is like a Season 1 expansion?
There are no expansions.
It would just be Season 1, Season 2. So Season 1 includes
but
months,
like
January to
Season
December.
1, Season 2, like how much do those expansions cost?
I think they're all cost the same.
It's not an expansion. It's just like a straight up new board game.
Yeah.
Well, I would say it's an expansion because it expands.
No, but they give you the whole game again.
Yeah, so it's another $60. So if I wanted to get Season 1 to Season 2,
you need to buy like a whole new base game.
Yeah,
basically.
But that is the question. I don't know what Season 2 includes, so I'm not sure if you're supposed to like pull things over from the previous season. I imagine there has to be something like that, but
right. Yeah. Did you look up Season 2 to see if it costs the same?
Let me do that right now.
Because it might be less. That's possible.
I don't think it is.
That's how it is for Time Stories, is the base game has the mechanics and the first, like, mission, basically, and then from there, like, the base game is, like, $60 or something like that, and then the expansions are each, like, $20.
So on Walmart, Season 1 is $63, I think, and Season 2 is $39.95. So it is a little bit less expensive, but not
but you're still,
okay. Not by a significant amount.
We'll get into it. Still. But yeah, that is good thing to put in the summary, though.
Yeah. All right. So that is Pandemic and Legacy board games. Thank you guys so much. I feel like that was like a fun summary. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I'm actually awake this time. This is great. I love
it. As opposed to every other episode.
When I'm literally asleep, yeah. So thanks so much for that. We are going to move on to our domains, where our representatives get to summarize what they have brought to the table. So, Keenan.
Yes,
tell us
it is I.
What is it, The House on Haunted Hill? Is that what it's called?
Betrayal at House on the Hill.
That wasn't the same thing even a little bit.
No, it's okay.
It had the word house in
you
there.
You had the right word.
The word hill.
You know, yours was just a Vincent Price.
And betrayal, I think.
Yeah, betrayal is really the big one, because that's what people call it, and you did miss
the
that
big
one.
Cool.
You did.
Well,
so that's at least a 25% off your overall score for remembering the name of this game.
Ooh,
oh, man.
Brutal.
Demerit.
Demerit. 12 points from Gryffindor. Betrayal at House on the Hill is a board game. Fun, you know? Yeah.
Weird.
Published by, like I said, Avalon Hill. I think it was published in 2004. Basically, all players begin as allies, and they all kind of working together exploring a haunted house. So it's got dangers, traps, and evil omens and stuff. And as you journey to new parts of the house, room tiles are selected from a deck, and then they form the board, as you explore. So by doing that, every time you play the game, this is not a legacy game. However, I actually was looking some stuff up last night, and I found out they are coming out with a legacy version.
Interesting.
I am very interested in. But basically,
yeah, if they fucking playtest it better than the expansion.
Yeah, right. Than their expansion. But anyway, so you explore the house, and there's 3 different floors, and you find stuff, weapons, items, haunts. Eventually, like what's called a haunt begins. A haunt is basically the plot of the game is revealed.
Yeah.
Usually it's a ghost story or some sort of monster or,
some spooky shit.
An eldritch, like spooky stuff. Basically a horror story happens, and one player is usually selected either randomly or due to some circumstances. There's a whole book that helps you, choose what kind. There in the base game, there's 50 haunts.
Yeah,
there's 50 different stories that you can play out. And one player almost always is selected as the traitor, in which he either because like his character dies during the creation of the story, or
goes mad with power.
Yeah, they just betray you. So they
sounds like Keenan.
Right.
Or they were evil the whole time. Yeah, Keenan is very frequently randomly selected as the traitor.
I know, like, really, it is the weirdest thing. Whenever I play this game, I don't know how it happens. No matter what character I play,
fate knows what's up.
The universe knows. Yeah.
Like, yeah, right? It's weird. Like, 3 out of 5 times, I'm just gonna be the fucking traitor. And I don't understand why.
It's a safe bet.
Because there have been times where I stay away from everything. I don't explore new rooms. I just kind of like,
Well, okay,
it's crazy.
Theory on this. You play as Ox Bellows a lot, who is, like, really good at strength and really bad at everything else, and usually...
I don't try to be Ox.
The traitor has to do with highest stat or lowest stat. So that could contribute to it, because
true, but the thing
Ox is not quite as
again,
neutral as everyone else.
I don't try to get Ox, though.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway, the point is, so eventually, like, ghosts or monsters or, like, other sorts of enemies spawn. So what's really cool is that the traitor is given, like, their own rulebook, and the heroes are given their own rulebook. And you both, like, go in a separate room, and you figure out your strategy, because you don't really always know what your goal is. Sometimes it's as simple as like, kill the monster or kill the heroes. Other times it's like, well, you need to get this parachute to get out of the house.
I feel like I've heard this story.
Oh, there's so many good stories that have happened.
No, we talk about that one a lot.
Oh my god.
So yeah, like the part of it, right, that's like legacy related is that though there is replay value, once you know like the secrets of like how the mechanics work in each haunt, it does make it not as fun to play that haunt again. There are 50 haunts, but you're bound to get the same one, like, again.
Right.
True. However, Jeff, the reason why I'm bringing it up is because you have different characters with stats that can change throughout the game, whether you get hurt or you get items, along with the fact that the room tiles change the board and you get a different board every single time.
Yeah.
I mean, eventually, I suppose you'll get the same exact board that you've gotten before, but,
But what are the odds of that? Would you even remember at that point?
Yeah.
And because of that, that also then impacts the story that you play. There are still some stories that, I know people I've played with. I've played it a lot because I used it when I was in college as an RA to play with my residents and my friends. So I ended up playing it a lot, and I ended up playing most of the base game stories except for like 3 or something.
Mm-hmm.
One of which I really wanted to get because it was a no trader scenario, which are my favorite, but that's, neither here nor there. Well, basically, so because, once again, the board changes, other times new players will then play as, the traitor and potentially take control of the monster and do things differently. Every time you play, like a legacy board game, it will be different. Not necessarily, like a legacy board game in the exact same way, that, like, this is the one way and, like, you don't know what's going to happen.
Right, like it's built upon. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but just because it's, like, it's going to be different every time. So Jeff, tell us about the Tachyon insertion in major events game.
What?
Oh, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
What is it called? Major
Tachyon
events?
insertion of major events. Yeah, that does actually do a pretty good job summarizing of what the base of the game is. So I'm talking about time stories. And yeah, the time stands for tachyon insertion in major events, because the premise of the game is that you are time travelers, and that what they do is they go back to major events in history, like major problems that needed to be solved. And like, as far as I know, it doesn't talk about real historical events. At least it doesn't in the base game.
One of them is called Dragon's Age,
so probably not.
Probably not.
Well, yeah, probably not fake. That's what it sounds like.
Or the game is making some pretty ambitious claims about basically how it works lore-wise is you, the players, are the time travelers, and it takes you and it inserts you into the minds of people who existed in the past.
Gross.
So you're not like bringing your physical form back. You are bringing your consciousness into someone else's mind.
Like X-Men.
So this does a cool mechanic where the individual personality of the person you're inhabiting actually has effects on you.
That makes sense.
And in the first story, it matters a lot, because the story that exists with the base game is you are brought back to a mental asylum, and you are put into the mind of mental patients.
Well, that's useless.
This is not a realistic mental asylum. It's all like fucking Arkham Asylum or some shit. Gartham, not literally, but more like that. Like
Gartham. It's like Gotham, but with more Art Garfunkel.
The character cards all look like fucking like crazy murderers. One of them has like a doll face like stitched onto their own or something, which would not fly in a real mental institution, I don't think.
I don't think so, no.
Well, it depends on what century we're talking about.
So the plot of the base game is you're trying to find this, like, cultist who is trying to, like, summon this, like, grand fucking manticore or some bullshit to come fuck up the world.
Lame.
So the legacy aspect of the game is that throughout the process of playing, you, depending on which decisions you make as a group, you can go and explore different places to find, like, clues that will... The clues... like, give you information for the players, but, like, also when you get a clue, it gives you, like, a physical, like, an icon that has, like, a certain pattern on it, and that pattern corresponds to different places in the like, map that you can unlock. So, like, some of the places are, like, every time you walk into a room, right, you take these, like, 5 cards and you lay out this this panorama image of, like, the scene that you're standing in, and you can choose to go to one of those 5 locations in each room, and when you do that, you flip over the card and it will give you, like, an interaction or something like that, which might give you different clues, and sometimes those result in giving you these patterns. And then in places in the map, there are some places in the panorama that, like, you can't go to unless you have, like, like the corresponding pattern.
Yeah.
So you get those throughout the game, and you can, like, then unlock different things, which, you know, goes into other places that you can find, right? You also get items throughout the game in a similar style. So to my memory, there's no, like, card ripping or anything like that. But the big thing about the game that makes it not really as replayable is that when you're playing the game, you uncover where things are and you, like, unlock mysteries. So you cannot erase that knowledge from your own mind, like, literally your own mind, not like a game mechanic mind, but, like...
Yeah. Like, you'll remember...
In the real.
You learn things about the game that would fuck it up, which is similar to, like... You know, like I was saying in Betrayal, where, like, once you've seen the fucking, you know, trader's handbook for a certain haunt, you know what the trader's objective is, that kind of thing, right? So I guess, like, I think that the number, it's been a couple of years since I've played it. I think that I could play it again, and I will have lost most of my, like, important memories about it. But maybe they'll come back, like, while playing it. So the big thing is that you get knowledge throughout. It also has an interesting mechanic in that... We didn't really explore this when I played it because we only played, like, the base game, and then you buy expansions, which is basically, like, a new scenario. Like, you're still the time travelers, but instead of being in this mental asylum trying to stop this cult, it's a different thing, like Dragon Age or whatever Laura said.
Nice.
Which, like, for all I know, could be like, oh, the king who called himself the dragon. I don't know. I haven't played it, but it is called Dragon's Age.
Yeah. It could be a metaphorical dragon. We have confusions about those a lot on this podcast. At least I do. But it also has an interesting mechanic where there are certain items that you get throughout the game that you actually can carry through to your next playthrough.
Dope.
They're not items that are necessary to the completion of the game, so you could complete the game without ever seeing one of these items. But if you like get these certain things, then like you find a box that has this item, which I don't remember how it justified it in the lore of it, but then you get that power up for the future time traveling scenarios, which I think is pretty cool. But yeah, that's basically how it works. I can get into a bit more later in some specifics, but yeah. So basically, you're time travelers, and you go through the scenario, and you're solving a little bit of a mystery on like who's the bad guy and how do we stop them, etc., etc.
Heck yes.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, guys. Now that we have all of our topic and domains summarized, let's move on to the discussion. So, I know that we have a couple of things that we wanted to talk about. I am going to kick it off with, I think, the most,
We're talking about price?
real world application of these games and, like, whether or not they're worth playing is these are games that you can really only play once. So is it worth it?
Okay, so the thing is, right, I think that when talking about Pandemic Legacy specifically, I think the game, like, hard rails itself into that system. Like, it's a legacy game in the style where you, like, don't want to do it all in one sitting, and it changes as you go along, right? But the way that we played it, right, where we were playing it on Tabletop Simulator, I think that it was absolutely replayable,
Yeah.
But the base game forces these things into it where you have to like rip up cards and put stickers on the board, and I think that that's mostly done so that you can only play it once, and it's not actually like, it might be kind of satisfying to rip up a card or whatever, but I don't think it's like totally necessary to the whole mechanics of the game. Whereas like Time Stories has this different aspect where like, yeah, you don't ruin the game at all, but if you played it again, you'd have like, even if you forget and years later you play it, the more times you play it, the less and less fun it's going to be because the mystery, right?
What's funny is that I feel like the mechanics, if we switched the way that Time Stories and Pandemic Legacy worked, I feel like both games would be better for it. Like, yeah, like for Time Stories, where the secret, whatever, or
right, so you might as well be ripping up your cards.
Right. That the ham is going to get the attack dog off, and so you can peer out the window or whatever the fuck. And so, like, you may as well be destroying it, where Pandemic is...
Just on a practicality standpoint, though, like, also, the thing about Time Stories is once you're done with the base game, you could conceivably sell it.
That's true.
So that, like, you wouldn't be wasting quite as much money in making it, and the game could be replayed, just not by you. Whereas Pandemic, you put stickers on the board and you rip up cards, you can't play it
You can't
again.
go back from that.
Yeah.
The phrase of you can only play it once, to me, after playing some of Pandemic Legacy, sounds a little misleading, because as we played for 5 hours, and we only got through, 2 months. Granted, it was on a, computer, so it was...
I did accidentally flip the table, and we spent about 15 minutes figuring out how to solve that problem.
Oh, the tabletop simulator mechanic of flipping.
Yeah, so, it would have been a lot smoother, I think, if we were playing in person. We would have been able to shuffle cards and move stuff around easier. But, however, I would like to say that... I think because you play through it once. However, playing it once is not like you sit down once and you play it. Like, to finish this game, we probably would have had to come back, probably 12 times, one for each month,
Yeah.
So I think, saying, you only play it once makes it sound like I'm going to sit down with this for 2 hours and it's going to be done.
No,
that is true. That is not what
you're absolutely right.
Sure.
But I would say, comparing it to something like a one-shot in D&D, right, where you might not be able to play it again as much if there's, a mystery aspect of it, right? That costs a lot less than a $60 board game. You know what I mean?
I agree. I was about to...
So I don't know if go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying that, one, I think it's misleading to say that it does. But, however, I think that for what it's trying to do is make a unique story that you can participate in. And I think that is a solid effort. And I think Pandemic Legacy, from what I saw, did do that, and they do have variations. So that way, if you happen upon someone else who has the game, you could play it differently. You can be a different character, you can do different traits, etc., etc., etc. But however, I just don't necessarily know if it's the best way to make a game with variation, because I think that's the goal of these games, have variation.
Right. I sort of feel like if the entire thing was a digital experience, like a video game. Like, I'm not asking, like, with, Tabletop Simulator, we bought it, and then the mod for it was free, right? Like, I'm not obviously saying that someone making this game should just give it out for free, right? But if it was a digital experience that could cost less and be less, like, needlessly wasteful of materials, like ripping up cards in Pandemic, then I think that would, like, the entire experience would be better off for that. Because I think we had a very positive experience playing the game, but I might not have felt as positively about it if I just spent $60 to do it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, and you make a good point, Keenan, about, we've been mentioning you can only replay it once, but also, like, I have a lot of board games. Charles and I play board games as our hobby.
Yeah.
And like, I'm only going to want to play, Eldritch Horror so many times, or, Dominion so many times. And honestly, I think I'm going to get just as much time out of Pandemic Legacy Season 1 as all of the others. So it's fair, almost like a question of how much time do you want to spend for that $60? Because I think Pandemic Legacy will definitely get you the
right. Like, if you equate it to some other experience that you, like, just spend $60 to have, like doing, like, an escape room or something, right? Like, that
which are way too expensive, by the way.
They are, but they're really fun, and it's an experience, and just, like, you can do other escape rooms, but each individual one you can only really do once because you're, like, solving mysteries and stuff. Like,
right.
It's not about, like, the money spent as much as it feels like an unnecessary use of the medium, I think, of board games. Because, like, it can be styled like a board game, but not be a physical board game. Because, like, I think that's something I appreciate about Time Stories more than Pandemic Legacy, in that, like, I think that you could get away with just selling the game after you play it the first time. I guess, now that I think about it, the fact that you have items that carry through might make that a little bit difficult, but, like, you could just take a screenshot of a card or something. You know what I mean? Whereas, like, Pandemic Legacy encourages you to, like, ruin the game, and then you've got this game that after you've gotten all of your perhaps money's worth of play out of it, lasting, like, several months or whatever, is just a thing that you have that you paid a lot of money for that is now garbage, essentially. You know what I mean?
Well, I do agree with you. I think the goal of legacy games is to create a unique narrative experience.
No, I agree. I like the style of it.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I like the idea of the style. I just think that I think that just, like, the reason why I wanted to talk about Betrayal is because I think it does what legacy games, or at least the legacy games that I've played, which is mostly just this Pandemic game, tries to do, but does it better and still has the ability to replay it. Because when you play Betrayal, the house will be different every time. You will be playing with different people different people who are using different characters, different stats, different items, different abilities will pop up. Because there is enough moving parts, there is so much variation that can happen. You may not even play the same haunt 2 times in a row, like, ever. You know? But
I think there's also something about legacy games that is really satisfying because you are building on specific events that happen in your game, though. Like, I appreciate I really want to play the Betrayal. Like, it sounds super fun.
Oh, you've never played it?
But
That's great.
No, I've never played it before. Yeah, I really want to. I've heard about it a couple times, and I just never. I don't know. It just hasn't happened.
Oh, that's great.
No, it's one of the best games I've ever played, I think.
And I like that idea of having it be almost nearly infinite for the purpose of building differently and having different haunts, and like, obviously not infinite, but, like, there's so many different interactions you can have. But there is something. Like, Charles and I are writing on the back of our cards, like, we named the medic Beddick because we're idiots and we do things like that. So he's Beddick the medic. And, like, you go back and you look at the service record on the back of that character's sheet, and we were like, oh yeah, I totally remember, like, in that month we fucked up the first time, but we got it the second time. And, like, it builds on your experiences, and I think that is really cool with legacies.
Yeah, it's like a specific to your adventure kind of thing.
Yeah, and so it feels very personal. It feels like, I could play, like, starting the game with you guys last night and playing through the first thing, yes, I knew that, if we were able to eradicate some of the diseases, it would make it easier in the long run. And I knew that there were other options coming down, like different types of characters and different like scars and flaws and upgrades, all that stuff. But it felt like a completely different game. So, and like that, I appreciate.
I think that like, I think Betrayal does relate to this in a really interesting way.
Oh, it totally
because
does.
like I agree. I think I agree with Keenan that it definitely does sort of meet this middle ground between like a regular board game and a legacy style game, because it's like if you took the entirety of the experience of the legacy game and then you mash that together into a smaller experience for like each game you play in Betrayal. Obviously, it doesn't go quite as in depth as you could in a legacy game for like months and months, right?
Yeah.
But it does, I think they are both trying to achieve the same sort of experience where like it's different every time you play it. It's like essentially the mission statement of it would, if it didn't come before legacy games, would be like a legacy game that you can play over again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like there is aspects of it that I think do make it hard to replay at an eventual point, because like some of the haunts, right, like if you get that haunt we're just like, we've got to skip it, we've played this haunt too many times, we know exactly how it works,
right,
like
or
we know what the traitor is trying to do, and there's no way to like not metagame at that point, whereas like, so it does kind of do that sort of thing, but since there are 50 haunts, the likelihood that you're gonna, get the same one in a reasonable amount of time from it, like at a first time, right? Then it does spread that out in a kind of natural way that
you'd have to play
helps
a lot,
that not happen.
a lot in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
No, but that did happen, right? Like when we started playing again in like after we all came home from like college, freshman or sophomore year or whatever, right? I do remember having this experience where we were playing this game, and then every time we got a haunt, Keenan would be like, oh, and it was like okay, well, we've never played this haunt, but like it's not going to be fun for Keenan to play it a 14th time, since he's now played it so many more times for the rest of
there's a few haunts that are just easier to get.
And some of the haunts I think are totally replayable, but some of them have like an aspect of it where you don't know what the other person is doing, and it's really important that you don't know what the other person is doing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We've touched upon something I'd like to expand upon it further, because you said, Laura, that, and Jeff, you talked a little bit about it too, like the personal experience of the game is big. And I think that that's something that, kind of pours over into real life, because, it's like the nostalgia of playing this game. It isn't about, Beddick thematics that we did this, I think that's a very cool thing.
It's a little bit Beddick thematic.
No, but what I mean is like, it's not, you stop, like these stories, they start off with like, saying that like, this character did it, but eventually becomes like I did it or we did it. I think that's a really cool thing. And for me at least, I think that like games like Betrayal, as opposed to these legacy games, also do that while like retaining the board that you're still allowed to play it, and you still have opportunities to play it again with other people, because we still all the time talk about like the little inside jokes about various characters.
About specific characters.
Like we were playing, like, for example, we played one time, and there's a character named Professor Longfellow, and like this one of the characters, Brandon Jaspers.
Give me that puzzle box, boy.
Exactly. Yeah, he got an item that's called a puzzle box, and because Professor Longfellow is like an old man and he was getting like this puzzle box from the kid, our friend Eddie Ryan just said, who listeners, you've heard on the podcast before, he just like put on like this very like bad Sean Connery accent and was just like, give me that puzzle box, boy, and like took it. And so from then on, like we kept this running joke about Professor Longfellow, and we also like had all these inside jokes about these different characters, because as you play it, you kind of get to know these characters in these scenarios. At college, me and my one friend joked because we both kept getting the traitor, right? And I kept being Oxbellis for some reason, and he kept being Missy DeVoe, which is like this little demon child girl, over and over again. And we kept getting these like traits that were about immortality. So we kept joking that whenever we played and we had those characters, we pretended like we were actually Like there was continuity to like the haunts. And then we were just two immortals who were stuck in another dumb situation.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so like I think by adding the variation, but also retaining an element of replayability, you allow yourselves to kind of I don't know how to say it. You expand beyond the scope of the game by introducing human interaction, and I think Pandemic does that as well as like Time Story seems to really do that because you get really in depth into stuff. I just think that you don't necessarily need to add game. Like, you don't need to prevent future play to allow this to happen, to make it unique.
Yeah. It's interesting because I keep on, like, they call it season 1 and season 2, and I can't break the mental connection between, like, the board game and, like, a TV show. Like, it's stuck in there because it's called seasons, because, like, I would not buy a season disc set of whatever, let's say The Walking Dead, because Pandemic is very similar, because it's like, you know, $80 for season 1, and then if you've seen it all before, like, yes, of course you can rewatch TV shows, but like it has a different, it's a different experience rewatching it the second time. And so like, I think it's interesting that they're almost trying to play off of that feeling of...
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that there are good and bad ways to do the sort of legacy style, because I think, like, I've said this before already a couple times, but just to bring it back again, like, Pandemic seems like it wanted to be a legacy game and it imposed rules that made it into a legacy game by ripping up the board, whereas something like Time Stories feels more like this is the story they wanted to tell, and it's a legacy game by its nature, because once you've played through it again, you can't, like, the game, there's nothing in the game mechanics that are telling you can't do this again. It's just like, it's telling you, hey, you're probably not going to have a good time if you do this again.
Right. And what's interesting is that it doesn't call itself a legacy board game.
Right, yeah. Well, I think Time Stories, to my knowledge, was one of the first ones. Like, I probably shouldn't say that because I don't know that for a fact. But like, and I think bring it back to what Keenan was saying about like having these different characters that you can like develop like character arcs throughout, right? Like, I think that that's more equivalent to like a running joke, whereas what a legacy game is equivalent to is like a campaign of a game, right? Whereas, like, these legacy games definitely feel like they're trying to take a board game and turn it into, and, like, mash it together with, like, a role-playing campaign, you know? Especially with Time Stories, because it's like you go on this continuous adventure and you technically, like, inhabit different characters every time, but you can, like, have running things, like, you know, you could, like, incorporate, like, aspects of a different body that you were in previously as something that's going to affect your decisions in the future, which is also... along with Betrayal, like a little bit of like a you make it yourself sort of thing instead of the game telling you to do that. But it's an interesting... Betrayal, I think, does hit the same boxes, but it's a much more short-term experience, whereas these legacy games are like, hey, this is a fucking experience that you're going to be having for a while. And I think that difference is pretty notable.
There's another legacy board game that Charles and I and one of his friends, Dan, started playing recently, where it's called, oh my gosh, I'm going to blank on this real hard right now.
The board game.
Gloomhaven? It's called Gloomhaven. And this fucking game, it weighs about like 15 pounds. The box itself weighs like 15 pounds. It is so intense. There are so many things to pop out. And like the whole thing is... it says like destroy this event after you've done it, and so it has that whole destruction of property thing, and it was like $120. Like, this is an expensive board game. And on top of everything else, like, I found that legacy games really do try to, like, they make it very challenging to win, and so you spend $120 to rip up all these cards to essentially lose. And it's not that it's not fun, but it can be really frustrating. And we were playing the other night, and like we started set up way too late. It takes like an hour and a half just to set the game up.
Right.
Because you have to like pop out all sorts of different like cardboard cutouts, and there's like
that's another thing I want to touch on once you're done with this line of thought. But
and his friend Dan was sitting there at the table after like we'd been doing this forever. It was like 10 o'clock at night already when we started the game. He's like, this should be a fucking video game. Like, it'd be so much easier if it was just like there on the screen. It doesn't have to be a physical
another
board.
thing is that I feel like legacy games are sort of a mashup between board games and role playing and like, you know, tabletop role playing games, but they're also sort of a mashup between board games and like video game style like campaigns, you know what I mean? But like touching on what you just said about like taking the time to set it up and everything, I think that that's like another detriment to the style where it's trying to tell you that you can't replay it. Because, like, once we got through the first season of, or the first month, rather, of Pandemic Legacy, I felt sort of like I wanted to start over. Because we fucked something up, and we were, like, a little bit confused as to how it was going the entire time. It's, you know, like, when you play a board game, you usually have a dry run of the first time you play it, so you're just, like, figuring out the rules, right? And I feel like that was a little bit necessary with something like Pandemic Legacy, is that you might want to like give it a go so you understand, like, because like I know that you're supposed to figure out things the way through, like, oh, if you were crassed earlier then it might fuck you up later, but having at least a little bit of that knowledge would have been nice, because then I feel like we wouldn't have quite had the same experience where we got through January and we're like, how is that different? You know? Right? Like, I want to get through the first month of the game and be like, okay, I understand what's going on here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's interesting, that point as well. Like, so Charles and I was sorry that I keep on talking about my campaign with Charles, but we got through like 3 months and then realized that my fiance, we got through the first like 3 months of Pandemic Legacy and we're like, why is this like, we keep on winning and something seems like we shouldn't be winning. And then we realized that I had been playing the quarantine specialist, and you're supposed to place one quarantine marker every turn. And I was using it as like every action I can place a quarantine marker, which is a huge difference. And so I basically sat down and just quarantined the fuck out of the whole board. We won, and then looked at it and we were like, oh, the whole world should be fallen at this point. Like, we should have no cities left. And there's no way to kind of back out of that because you've already done it.
Right. Like, that was an experience that I was having too, where it was like, since have had more experience playing the regular, like, normal game of Pandemic, right? I was getting through the first few months, or the first month of Legacy, thinking like, wow, this is really going well.
Yeah.
Because Pandemic fucks you over super hard, and it seemed like at that point, everything in the game was just making it easier, because I didn't yet have the understanding that though it was making it easier in the short term, in the long term, you were really starting to fuck yourself over by doing some of the things that we were doing.
Yeah. And we also didn't, so the part of what we messed up in that first end of season was that we didn't flip the stop card, which I will take responsibility for, which says like, oh, now you can't treat this normally. It takes 2 actions to treat, and this particular virus now has a mutation that is negative. And so that's like a huge part of the game.
Yeah,
like,
to be fair, halfway through January, it was supposed to be different from the base game, but we got all the way through January and we're like, so January is just the base game, right? And then we realized that afterwards, one of our diseases was supposed to be uncurable, and we're like, oh, but I guess that doesn't really change anything, because then we went and cured all 4 diseases, whereas that was the last one that we cured anyway, so... Like,
it kind of worked out.
We would have won actually earlier than we did. Yeah. Which is, Do we,
all right, cool. So that was our discussion, which, like, I feel like I could talk about this for hours. So this kind of blew through.
Get into some of our specifics of...
but it is really fun. But we do have a listener comment. It's not as much of a question, but I would love to talk about it a little bit. This is from Sam Bowles. Sam, I miss you so much, and thank you for commenting on this, and let's see each other soon. Here we go.
And then we from what she just said, it sounds like she knows this person, but it turns out Laura does not know this person, and she would have said that regardless of who left the comment. She's like, hey, I miss you. We should see each other soon. And some listener out there is just like, what? I know
We're
Colin.
watching.
I'm not affiliated with Laura.
I'm channeling my inner Mr. Rogers. I think the world needs more of it.
I think everyone should.
All right. So Sam says, we recently discussed among my friends how we like playing Pandemic as kind of a palate cleanser among the other more competitive games we play.
I agree.
Because it's a game where everyone is truly on the same team and can collaborate on strategy. While I haven't played the Legacy version, I would call attention to the expanded series of Pandemic games, which are really great expansions of the game mechanics in new and interesting ways. Iberia curing the Spanish peninsula in the 1800s, hindered by the antiquated technology. Rising tides stopping and preventing the Netherlands from flooding rather than curing diseases. And even Reign of Cthulhu.
Cthulhu.
And even the Reign of Cthulhu trying to stop the spread of dread insanity. And that, I think, actually brings me to a really interesting point, is that I've never played the Pandemic expansions, but I feel like that might give me a very similar sense of satisfaction to playing the legacy games. Have you guys ever played any of the expansions?
Yeah, I don't remember which one it was.
Like I said, I've played the game once before and not very well apparently. Yeah, so I thought I thought we were just great, and this game was like everyone's like it's so hard. And I was like, what are you talking about? We're like basically done.
We were doing really well, and all of us kept turning to Keenan and be like, this is not how it normally goes. I don't know what's going on right now. And then afterwards, we realized that we forgot to put any of the epidemics in the deck.
Oh my god. That's like the whole game.
That's the whole game, yeah. I have played the expansions. I don't know what the title of it was, but it comes with like 3 options. One of them is you have this fifth rather, disease that does slightly different things than the other ones, but otherwise just functions the same way. Another one is you have a mutagen that you add to it so that every time you get an outbreak, or I think the first outbreak determines which disease is called the virulent strain, right? And then every time there's like an outbreak, I think, or of that, then it imposes some different effect, like, oh, you need to like cure it with 6 cards or things like that. Things sort of similar to how they added in Legacy. And then the third in that expansion is it adds a whole new element to the game where there is another character called the bioterrorist who is literally working against the other people and is trying to fuck up the world and has different mechanics. I haven't played a lot of that one, but the concept is kind of cool. But to go to the comment, I absolutely agree about the game being like a palate cleanser of sorts, because like it's weirdly like a lot more stressful than regular games and a lot less stressful, because like as someone who perhaps gets a little bit too competitive when playing board games sometimes, it's really nice to play this game and like win or lose, you are commiserating with other people. So it's like it doesn't really build up the same kind of rage as much as it builds up like oh, we're so fucked kind of attitude, where it's just like even if you lose, it's really fun, I think. And when you're working with other people, then it's just like a woo! The game is really fun because it's like really fucking us over right now, and it's so I agree. It's like such it's a breath of fresh air while at the same time being just like an immensely stressful experience.
Yeah, it's definitely nice to like just play a co-op. I feel like co-op is becoming a not obsolete, but a dated, I would say, like model of play for a lot of things, like video games and games and just everything in general. I feel like, things are moving away from cooperative play and moving more into like competitive play, which is like fine, I suppose. But I do miss like classic cooperative, and even when like things are like cooperative, like they can like kind of turn, like even Betrayal. There was a point where like I honestly was getting like really annoyed with like Jeff and the guys, was because I would play and I like this literally happened multiple times like during sessions where I'd be like, all right, well, I mean, like, can you give that to me so I can help myself? Like before the haunt happened, like Jeff and like other people would be like, no, don't give it to him. And I'm like, why? I'm your friend. And they're like, no, because you're gonna be the traitor soon. I was like,
traitor.
No, I'm not. And then I wouldn't be the traitor.
I'll take credit for that. I'm sorry.
Because I'm like, oh, it was ridiculous. So it is even in those games, like that's kind of like negative aspect could still happen. It is nice in like Pandemic can just be like, all right, you're all trying to save the world, go do it. And you're all like, well, I mean, I see no reason to like mess this up for anyone.
The hard thing about Pandemic is getting new people into it, because since it's collaborative, everyone sort of has their cards out on the table, literally, but also figuratively. Whereas like everyone's just dictating like, hey, this is our best course of action, and everyone's sort of deciding turns together. So like if a new person is playing, then they're basically just like listening to everyone else strategize, which is a little bit rough.
Yeah, I could just speak to that. However, I would like to say that I didn't need to cure that final disease, all right? That was my decision. I could not cure it.
And I'm glad you did.
The world's glad we did. Yeah, I was actually getting a little weirded out. I was weirded out when you acted that way, because it was literally like the second turn. I was like, I'm gonna go left. You're like, what? You can't just go left. And I was like, I mean, we have nothing to do. I was just gonna do something.
There's always something to do, Keenan. It comes.
We have
in waves.
charts and plans.
I would like to point out, I wish that we'd recorded our session last night in a lot of ways, but I wouldn't want anyone to have to listen to that because it was 5.5 hours. But at some point, Keenan goes, "Wait, is this the flip the table button?" And Jeff was like, No, Laura, turn off the flip the table option. And so I, being new to Tabletop Simulator, then clicked the button, which flipped the table. And Jeff was like, "Keenan, what the fuck?"
It was the natural assumption, okay? I stand by this. Keenan goes, "Is that a table flip button?" And 2 seconds later, the table flips. It was the logical assumption, okay? He's a devious little bastard. You all know it's true.
That's little too. Also,
man.
like, I don't know. And I asked a question. I was very concerned because, like, my mouse was nowhere near the table flip button. I was very concerned it was, like, thought activated or something, you know. Which would be a terrifying game mechanic, by the way.
That'd be amazing.
I'm really fucking pissed off at you people. Table flips involuntarily. I would not do well in these games.
Thought activated game modes, just for like when you think about betraying the people in a game, like I should just screw them over.
God.
It happens. Like no, still you thought it.
I thought better of it. No.
There's no rewind time button in real life. All right, we should wrap up the discussion. Although I really could talk about this forever. But thank you guys so much. I know, normally we try to keep our the amount of time that we have to prepare for an episode a little shorter than 5.5 hours, but it was super fun. I usually only play board games with Charles and a couple of other friends in this area, so it's really nice to get to play with other people.
Yeah, we should definitely play Betrayal sometime. Like
I would love to, yeah.
Like,
and if they do Betrayal
podcast.
Legacy, I would totally do the Tabletop Sim.
I actually, honestly, like I'm not a huge fan of like the idea of legacy games in general. However, a Betrayal Legacy game sounds actually really right. That sounds really fun. If it's done right,
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll find out soon. Oh, thank you so much, Sam, for commenting on our Facebook page.
Yes, Sam, you're a cool.
We appreciate
cat.
you.
Sam, who's my childhood friend instead of Laura's. We've known each other for years. I can't wait to see you again, Sam. I love you.
Sam, who I've never seen. I can't wait to see you again. And I hope you are well.
I hope you are well too. All right. If you want to be like Sam, you can have your own question or comment on
it's like
our
that
show.
bad meme from like a year and a half ago. It's just like, this is what Sam did. Be like Sam.
Be like Sam. Usually, I think we try to do it the Monday before we record, so we have about a week to get any comments. But we will talk about them on our episodes. All right. I guess the outro is where we do the rest of that stuff. So thank you both for a lively and entertaining discussion. I used 2 adjectives.
Oh shit! She's fucking double
adjective. Yeah.
Shit, double adjectives.
Put in an extra effort. The double adjectives.
I just want to have the Gold Star hosting award.
Yeah.
Oh, we
right.
could do that episode 100, the meta episode.
Yeah, I was about to say that could be the.
Oh, that'd be so fun.
Of episodes of the Common Geeking program.
That could be the golden host.
We're definitely popular enough for that. For us to start talking about our previous content.
True. All right, so we are going to move on to our ratings now, and we're going to begin by having each of our representatives rate the topic on a scale from 1 to 5.
Disease cubes?
I was thinking about that. I think I'm going to do 1 to 5 CODAs. So CODA is the mutation of the disease that becomes your worst enemy in Pandemic Legacy. It just continues to get worse and fuck you over. So.
Or would have if we had remembered to do that mechanic in January.
You're not wrong. All right, so 1 to 5 CODA cubes.
All right, King Kodesh, I think we'll rate this at. I'm gonna give it a solid 3.5 CODA because once again, I always reserve 5 is for perfect, nothing wrong with it, and 4 for mostly I love it, and it is. I almost really do like everything that's involved, but once again, I don't like the finality. Is that the word? of
Makes
it
sense to me.
all, because I do like the idea of...
I don't like the finality of it all. I hate
Yeah.
how we're all gonna die one day.
Yeah. Well, I
And
don't like
legacy
the
board games remind me of that inevitability.
of my mortality. But I think it does do a really cool thing that I've never really super experienced, which is make a long form narrative into a board game. And I super love things that carry over your choices.
Yeah.
I was just playing like the Dragon Age Inquisition games, and you make a lot of like big decisions in that. I love that stuff. I also think the cooperative/collaborative elements of it is super fun and really like works together, and it doesn't make you have to like actually utilize people.
Yeah.
I think that the elements they used to progress forward, like to put in like the special abilities, the scars, the consequences, whatnot, were actually really thought out and very interesting. Like when bad stuff happened, it was all kind of bad stuff. But when good stuff happened, it was all kind of good stuff. And it did really encourage you to try like your hardest to get the good stuff, because it's harder to get than the bad stuff by a significant margin. So I think I would give this a solid 3.5 out of 5 disease cubes. Hopefully the blue ones.
Yeah, I think what CODA, is that what it's?
Yeah, CODA.
CODA. I think I'm gonna have to give Pandemic Legacy a solid 4 out of 5 CODA. It's like Sam said, it is definitely like such a palate cleanser of a game in turn, like Pandemic and Pandemic Legacy. And though we didn't get through, though we didn't get far enough into it, I was starting to see where all the building blocks of the game were really expanding upon the Pandemic experience, especially when you get further in the game, and like that stuff really excited me. And even though we played for 5 hours, right, and we're all a little bit dead after it, I was like, when we were about to put down the game, right, I was just like, oh, but now I just really want to see what happens.
I know. I actually really want to keep playing.
Yeah, no, we should definitely we should meet back up again and pick up where we left off, or start again if we're really masochistic. So I've got my gripes in general with the legacy style games, and particularly how I think Pandemic tried to incorporate it in terms of like ripping up cards. I'm really not a fan of. But I like the form in general. I think is a really interesting narrative tool, and when done right, I think Pandemic does a lot of things right, it does some things wrong. Time Stories, I think, is a really good example of me of how legacy games should work. It's a really interesting long form usage of the medium of board games, and I'm all about board games, so 4 out of 5 CODA.
Awesome. I now have the actually extremely difficult job of awarding the Gold Star student.
We're rivals, Keenan. We're rivals.
You guys are rivals, and
the cooperation has ended.
No more cooperation. Now we're fighting to the death.
The traitor has been revealed.
And this is really hard for me this round because we all were in that game together, and we all really worked together really hard. And then I think you guys both had really amazing points about the pros and cons of legacy board games, and I brought really interesting topics.
But one of us had a much better point, right? Wink, wink.
Wink, wink.
He's talking about me. Wink, wink.
So this is really hard for me. I am going to award.
Don't worry, Laura. No matter what, we're still family.
So the winner of the Gold Star Student Award is going to get a golden
helicopter to get the hell out of the city.
Yeah, a golden.
Ooh, we should do one of the events, like One Quiet Night or something.
I know, I was thinking about that actually.
Golden stopwatch for borrowed time. A golden cure.
Shit, you guys are both pulling really good things. I'm trying to think of what we could also draw. You know what I mean? Like a thing that is also drawable.
Oh, I could just take the card and put it on the.
That's true.
You can do the golden borrowed time. I'll just take the borrowed time card.
You could just do the golden funded.
They're already
event.
yellow. It will not be difficult.
That's true. All right, fine. We're gonna do the golden One Quiet Night because I think that is one of the most powerful funded events.
One Quiet Night allows you to skip the infect stage.
Yeah,
so
which is huge.
Things are a little bit nice for one turn.
Yeah, for 30 seconds, and then you're fucked again.
And then everything's horrible again.
this is really like a 50-50 toss-up for me, so I apologize, and I know that that's going to suck for both of you to hear, because it could go
one
either
of
way.
us
But
it's going to hear a lot better, you know?
the gold star One Quiet Night will go to Jeffrey Leavitt.
Fuck! Lame!
Laura, it has been a secret objective of mine for a long time to receive a single gold star from you on your episodes. You and Pat. I've been on a lot of episodes where I've felt I've done very well, and then the other person just edges me out. And then, I'm so happy.
This is lame. This is stupid.
I will have my fucking restful night as a grad student. I don't get a lot of those.
Oh man, this really was such a fun episode for me to do. Thank you guys so much for participating.
This was a lot of fun.
That wraps up this episode. Thank you guys so much for
does.
listening to the Common Geeking Program. I'm your host, Laura Kramer, and you can message me at the Common Geeking Program Facebook page. That was, for some reason, very hard for me to say. And again, I have been joined by...
Hello. It's Keenan Kodesh. If you look to find me, you need to look no further than yourself in the mirror, because I am one with all of you.
That's terrifying.
All my things are terrifying. I haven't said one nice thing, and people were just like...
Yeah, I personally like that thought better than him being in a well-cooked brownie that I'm biting into. I'm never going to forget that one.
That was the emotion of it. Jeez, it's like you aren't even listening to my sermons.
Sermons?
Thanks, Keenan.
Yeah, that's thank you for having me. That's
and my name is Jeff Leavitt. You can find me on Instagram at Things I Wish Existed. There is a dot between each word. I guess I also exist on Facebook and YouTube. I don't know what my YouTube name is. I think it's just Jeff Leavitt. I don't put a lot on there, but I've been toying around with uploading some more juggling videos that I've been taking at places.
Nice.
you were on fire.
I just put a lot of nice stuff on Facebook of slow motion fire juggling. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, damn. That
Yeah,
sounds intense.
Jeff finally.
The filming was slow motion and not the physical action. That would be more
probably
impressive.
good, yeah.
One would be more impressive, though.
All right. That is good. Also, I'm going to say something that is not true, but also is definitely true.
What the fuck?
Oh.
Whoa.
Keenan,
Okay.
you only lost because you pulled all the fucking epidemics in February. Just every single one. It was just...
It wasn't my fault. I
can't-
swear, I don't think the
It's true.
shuffling
I
was done.
don't think I pulled an epidemic at all the entire time we played. It was
You
one
didn't.
of the two of you every single time.
I pulled, I think, all of them the second or the first month.
In January, and Keenan pulled all of them in February.
Like
Yeah.
I said, it was rigged. That made it that there was every 5.
That means
there
if
was
we
an
made it to
epidemic.
March, it probably would have been me.
It would have been you. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
All right. So thank you guys for being you and for being here. And next week, our episode is going to be hosted by Keenan. Keenan, what are you talking about next week?
I will be talking about the Darkest Dungeon, and we will be focusing on games that use the mechanics to tell a story rather than like a traditional narrative.
All right. Cool.
Neato.
Be sure to tune in next week on October 26th to listen to that.
Oh, boy.
Make sure that it is spooky because that is almost Halloween time.
Oh, that's good that we're doing the Darkest
Wait,
Dungeon.
what time does that make this episode air?
The 19th of October.
Which is nowhere near Chris.
That means I'm
is-
24, guys. Hooray. That's
Since
after my
when?
birthday. Since this episode airs, I
Wait a
guess.
minute, wait, Jeff. Why do I keep fucking thinking that your birthday's in December? Why do I keep
Because
doing that?
all of our other friends' birthdays are in December. Jocelyn, Chowder, Austin.
No, Jocelyn's like the 21st, right?
No, Jocelyn is the 28th. No, 27th.
Wait, who's the 21st?
No, Jocelyn is the 27th. I always forget this because I know that I always wish her happy birthmas on the 26th, which makes me forget that her birthday is actually on the 27th. 21st is Chowder. Austin is the 11th.
Now that you know when most of our wonderful pod
Friends
friends'
were born.
birthdays are, hit them up on Facebook or Twitter. And hit us up on Facebook or Twitter at Common Geeking Program. Or nope, it's at Geeking Program. I lied to you straight to your faces.
Right to your ears.
Yeah, really to your ears. Yeah.
Straight to your ears. Any engagement, such as sharing a post, tagging us, or tweeting #CGP,
Makes me happy.
will enter you into a raffle where you get to pick the topic for a future episode. Reviewing us on Apple Podcasts is a critical help to growing our show, and we'll read all new reviews on air. This is our weekly check to see if we got any.
It's more for us than you.
No.
We did not last week, so.
Bumzo.
Oh God, I've forgotten how to. And no, we do not have any new reviews recently, but give us a review. It'd be great.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for listening, subscribing, sharing, and everything that you do. I almost just said listening again. Could dodge, dip, dive, duck, dodge. And we will talk to you next week.
Hopefully the world hasn't
Right.
fallen to an epidemic by then.
Ew.
This episode of the Common Geeking program is hosted by Laura Kramer, joined by Keenan Kodish and Jeff Leavitt. This episode is sponsored by that one time that we played Betrayal, I was the traitor, and everyone blamed Keenan instead. The podcast is created and produced by Colin, Ketchen, and Jeff Leavitt, with this episode edited by me, Colin Ketchen, and featuring original music by me. At this time, CommonGeekingProgram.com is in the midst of a redesign, a little easier to look at, and it has some more information. You can learn about us, check some gold stars, and we'll be adding more as time goes on. So take a look at that. Tune in next week, but in the meantime, thank you for listening to this.
All right, we might have to clap sync again because my weekly harass someone alarm just went off to tell someone to start planning their episode.
Who is it? Is it me?
No, it can't possibly be you. We're recording your episode right now, Laura.
Probably me.
I just feel like I'm always behind.
It's Colin. Fuck you, Colin.
It's Colin.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right.
I love it.
That also might make the clap a lot harder to find if it's evening out all my audio, but that's all right.
Oh, that's true.
Well, they
I
can
guess we'll
fucking
find
find it. Yeah. Looks like them, right?
And if it's a pain, it's just Colin, so who cares?
We'll figure it out.
Colin joke.
He's like an editing fiend or something.